Welcome back to the Attitude Makeover podcast. This is your host, Saujanya Shetty. Continuing on our CXOs series, I'm very excited to have with me the passionately ambitious social entrepreneur, Nitish Chiniwar. He's the founder of a company called Bridge of Sports. I actually bumped into an international article that spoke about Bridge of Sports as well as spoke about one of their athletes who was representing India in the international space, and got me curious, and I learned from my previous stint in sales on how to really do cold calls, and here's one of the outcomes of that. My guest today, Nitish Chiniwar. It's a very interesting story of how he went about really setting up Bridge of Sports with the idea of actually creating a holistic platform that provides equal opportunities to the marginalized and the most vulnerable communities in India. By holistic, I mean it's a school that does both education, health, mental health, as well as physical health, and training these students from remote villages in India on athletics. And we do now have from Bridge Sports national athletes who are now venturing into the international space. It's a very inspiring story for me, and I'm thinking you would also be really hooked on to the entire conversation. In this 90-minute conversation, we go into the journey of a social entrepreneur, and I realize how different and difficult it is from a regular entrepreneur's journey, which in itself is not an easy path. In this process, you'll also see the passion, the ambition, and the vision and the learning process that Nitish goes through as he builds this community and trains his students to represent India in the 2028 Olympics. As always, I hope you like this recording, and I look forward to more likes and subscribes, and see you soon in the next episode. So first of all, thank you so much. And I thought I'll start off with really understanding who is Nitish and what are early years and how it's been instrumental. I don't think these things, having done 33 episodes, what I've seen is some of these things of, having a passion-led journey doesn't just happen overnight. This
Correct. It's
early years and a lot of your experience and your journey influences how you choose your life going forward. So I want to understand what were early years like, and if you could also sort of talk to me about through that, who is Nitish?
Okay, sure. So early years, growing up, there's a lot of sports influence, watching a lot of sports. I used to play a lot of sports. It wasn't like I was good in any sport, but I used to just enjoy sports. And education was reasonable. I wouldn't be like really, being in the top 10 of the class was my goal or something. So I was just enjoying sports. Through sports, I used to grow up playing with my friends around, with my parents, sister, right? That was sort of a growing up years of until 15, 16, that was a major part of my life. And then you move towards studying, and I was not quite sure what I really want, because we didn't have much of technology that time to even search and see what options we have, right? So I chose to do my engineering, and as the engineering started completed, that's the time where you have to sort of decide, right? Where do you want to go? Which direction you want to take your life and career into? And that's when I used to follow motorsports a lot, and I was quite interested in that field. And I realized that, in a field like motorsport, I can be part of that field as a part of an engineer, right? Working on the cars or bikes, etc. So I decided this is something I'll pursue, even though I did not have any background. I did not know much about cars or anything as such. But I decided, this is what I want to pursue this. And it probably the first time in my life where I decided, I really like something and I want to do this thing. So engineering finished, I did not sit for my placements or anything, because I knew if I get placed, your mind gets deviated, right? You want to work and then try to do, and that never happens. So I did not sit for placements. Then I decided, I need to learn about these things, because the biggest ambition in motorsports is some like Formula One, right? That's the epitome in many ways. So to get there, I really need to know, learn everything. So I worked in Bangalore, a lot of garages, etc., to really understand what is a car all about, how does it function. I worked for a few racing teams in Bangalore also. We not really getting much paid really. I used to get paid about 5,000 rupees a month, which wasn't enough even for the petrol to go to the office space. But I think 2 3 years, 2013, that I worked in this space, and I really learned everything. I read a lot, and I used to slowly, then internet had come, so I used to get opportunities to read and understand these things. Then I applied for a college in UK called Cranfield. So like how in US there's a Silicon Valley, in UK it's the Motorsport Valley. There's a region where all these racing teams, almost all F1 teams are based there itself. So there's a college there called Cranfield University, which offered a degree in Masters in Motorsport Engineering.
Interesting.
Probably only one or two colleges in the world offer that specialized course. So I got into it, and I was like, okay, now this is because most of the Cranfields graduate are working in Formula One. So then 2013, sort of I left India. I mean, I decided, okay, this is the field I will be in. Probably I thought I'll not come back to India. And at that stage, if somebody had told, would you want to start an NGO or something, I would probably just laugh or hit that person. And like, I was that type of a guy, because I liked what I'm doing, and motorsport is a lot of fun, right? I mean, at least from the outside, because I sit from the outside. You watch F1, it's like travel the world, and it is so much fun and all of that. So I went to UK, completed my graduation there, and as I started completing my graduation, also before that in 2012 when the first Indian F1 happened, I was there. I was volunteering there as a part of the organizing group, etc. So I'd seen it like really close, and it was very fascinating. I think that's 5 days. It was the best days up till when I was born. So it was really fun. So when I went to UK during the whole master's degree, I also volunteered there in their F1 races and the volunteering with the local racing teams, etc. So finished my graduation, I started applying to these F1 teams and even other sort of racing teams, because F1 is the top. There are a lot of different levels there. And through the process of interviews, etc., they were quite reluctant because of the immigration laws and sponsoring the work visa, because I'm from outside of Europe. And that was a bitter pill to swallow in many ways, right? Because you do so much, you leave your country, people, prospective relationships, and you go there to pursue something, and then you achieve everything, and then you get overlooked because you are not from the same region. And I did get a job there, so that made it even bad, because I used to think that if another company can sponsor, why can't and they sponsor the visa? It's just a bit of paperwork and all of that. So that's when I started to really think, right? I mean, why should somebody's background or origin define where they should be in life? If everybody is working equally hard to achieve the same goal, everybody should get the same opportunity. It should not be that one person, because he's a guy or she's a female, or he or she comes from a different social background or ethnic background, they should work 10 times more harder to achieve the same thing. It should not be like that. And so that's where I really needed to make a choice, because I was 25, 26 then. More or less, I realized if I make any choice now, if I want to make any choice, it has to be done as to where I want to be, what I want to do when I'm 10 years older from now, and what will really make me happy. I could stay back there and get a resident permit. Probably by now I would have gotten the resident permit and work in F1, right? Or should I choose something to change this, do something to change this whole journey for anybody who wants to do something in their life? We should create an equal opportunity platform. And sports was always something which I grew up, as I told, right? So can we do something like that? And it was not a decision in an instant, of course. I thought over it for almost more than a year and a half. I came to India for a 1 month break. I met a lot of people, a lot of local schools, athletes. I wrote to a lot of ex-Olympians of India. I discussed with them. One of them, Shikha Tandon, she's still in our advisory board. She was the first person who sort of I discussed. I did not know her. She didn't know me, but she responded and we started talking. And she shared her own journey, and it was still difficult for her also to, in swimming, the whole journey she had to take and reach where she reached. And she also mentioned that if opportunities were better, she could have tried better and achieved much more in the space of swimming. So in the similar lines, I spoke to a lot of people and realized the journeys are same. I mean, the journeys are different for different people. I mean, people who come from a difficult social or economic background, it's even more harder. But even people who come from reasonably good background, if they don't have the opportunities around them, it's still hard for them. Of course, that's more economically harder, but for others, it's more mentally, socially harder. So, yeah, that's where the whole thought process started. And I thought, okay, I think I want to do something in 10 years' time. If we are doing something where we are creating opportunities for people who don't have those opportunities to excel in whatever field they choose to, I think that would make me more happier than staying back and getting a resident permit and then working in Formula One. Even though that was my
bigger aspiration.
As passionate I am about BOS, I was more equally or maybe even more passionate about that. But I guess you need to make a choice somewhere in the life where what you really want. And I didn't want to miss that chance, because as you get older and you get more used to everything, and making that choice becomes a little more difficult. Yes. So I realized, let's take a plunge now.
Yeah, I can relate with making these choices at a later point. Like, I made the choice of quitting the corporate world and jumping into something like this with Attitude Makeover at 46. But it has its own challenges at a later stage, because you have to think of your family and a whole bunch of the risks and all. Yeah. So I have a couple of questions to what you just spoke about. The first one being, you said you worked in garages. Mm-hmm. At that time, the garages over here, I mean, even now, there are few garages which are more, niche, mechanical engineers setting up the whole garage in a different way and, digitizing the whole thing and using technology. But at that time, it was like old school garages, right? Yeah, how were you working in garages?
So it was very old school. I mean, every day my shirts and pants were black in color. So, and there weren't engineers as such. There were people who have learned it on their own. And the idea was to just actually work at that level itself, because that's when you really understand. Because with technology, sometimes you don't even know what's happening behind the technology, right? So that helped a lot to really understand very mechanical part of everything. And honestly, even though it wasn't paid well, of course it wasn't paid well at all, and you can't probably sustain a lifestyle or anything with that. But in terms of happiness, it was really great. And I was really happy. And there I had met an engineer who had done masters in US from one of these Ivy League only, I think. And he was working in BMW, and he quit his job and he came back and he was working here as a head there. He was getting paid very 50K, still reasonable, right? Not a lot in many sense. So he used to say, and I used to ask him, why did you quit? You had everything, right? Why would you quit that and come and do here? And he would try to explain me a lot of things, like why it happened, the whole journey. But I would really not understand, right? I would in my head be laughing at him, like, is he lost his mind, or what is he even talking about? I still remember in 2015-16 I wrote to him and I told, now I understand. And that's when he realized that you still understood it quite early in the career. It took him a lot more time to get there. Yeah.
People take a long time, like me. I think the other question is, when we were talking outside, I asked you, do you come from a really well-off background in that case? You want to talk about what happened at home when you came back and started talking about, this is what I want to do after going there, studying. Like, if I was a parent, and I grew up in a not so economically well background,
Yeah.
right? So everybody pivoted around. She's going to go study now, finished. She's going to get a great job. Things are going
Yeah.
to change for the house also. So you become a hero at home.
Correct, correct.
And suddenly here you are coming and saying, I want to go work in a garage, I want to start an NGO. How is that at home?
So both journeys was sort of tough because after engineering, again when I chose this motorsport, that was again a very niche thing which very few people would understand, right? And that initial 2011-12 also was trying to get them to understand, and they understood. Okay, like there's something you want to do, and I was pursuing it. I was making efforts to learn, whether it was working in garage or coming back and reading online until 2 3 a.m. In the morning, waking up at 7 and going and working again, right? When you see that, okay, he is really putting effort, and it's not just I'm just saying that I want to do something. So that journey took off, and then I got into this university, like one of the best for this field. So it was, everybody were like, okay, now things have settled, and I got a job in UK and everything, right? So it was all great. Then
You came back with one more book
yeah,
leave.
because when I still remember in the airport when I was leaving, everybody knew that I'm not going to come back at least for the next 10 years. Maybe after 10 years I get bored of F1 and then I return, but and everybody, sort of friends, family, everybody knew that. So then when I decided to, move, pivot in this direction, again it was a shock for both like friends, family, because they didn't understand much of the background, like how the thought process evolved, why it evolved also, right? But I had decided to sort of come back in many ways. So, and because I was also away from home for a long year, like almost 4 years, I think. So they told, okay, let him come. We'll see what he has to say or what he wants to do, etc. Then I discussed about the non-profit Bridges of Sports. I want to start an organization to help children in sports to excel. And non-profit was a very new world. I mean, even now it's a very new world, but maybe because of social media and everything, now people understand there is a social sector, and it's actually a proper sector where you can work and make a living. You can't make a lot of living, but you can make a living, like a good living.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of happiness, right? A lot of satisfaction in many ways. But at that time it was very tough because where would we get the funds from? Who would pay for us to train some kids, right? And because we normal family, right? Not like a very well off or anything as such. Maybe initially I had some savings of 1 lakh or so. So that's from that only we had to start. And so then we discussed, and I told them, okay, let's give it 1 year. I came back in 2016 August. By 2017, say October, if nothing happens, then I'll take up a job and whatever, like do a corporate job or jobs related to automotive industry maybe. So then that was a deadline sort of we set for ourselves, and at home and everybody, okay, take 12 months, it's fine. Let's see what happens. So that's how the journey started. And those 12 months or the fundraising was not easy.
Yeah.
Because again, now I realize, right, lot of fundraising in this sector, non-profit, because especially non-profit sector in India has a lot of baggage also, because there's a lot of anybody who, if you know somebody who starts an NGO, you always think, okay, why did he do that? Maybe they have a lot of money and they just want to
Yeah.
use NGO as a front, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems in that sense. So, and then if I was an Olympian or something, little more easier to tell the story, like, because I went through a journey as an as an
Yes.
athlete,
Yes.
and I couldn't get the support, and that's why I'm starting. Now here is a guy who's saying, I come from motorsports background, I want to start an NGO to train kids in a certain sport. So it was tough to convince. And it's even more tougher if you don't have somebody who can refer you or who can make a connect, etc. So I think until July there was nobody. There was no support in many ways. And then luckily, and maybe it was all meant to happen. That time there was two non-profit incubators started in the first time ever. There is, of course, for-profit incubators were always there, but non-profit wasn't there. And there are, I am Bangalore started one, and Encore, the Nudge Foundation, it's called. Now they started one to support non-profits, young non-profits, and incubate them with a seed funding. And we got selected, and in September, like 1 month before the deadline, we got the first grant of 18 lakh rupees. So that's where then I told, oh, now we have the money, let's go. And we started that way.
And what's been your experience? Because when I took the plunge, right, Nitish, it's not easy. I can totally relate with many things you told me here. One is you're not from that field. Why would they want to listen? It's the same thing, right? I'm not from a content creation space, so why would someone listen? And no one knows who Saujanya is, so why would they listen to Saujanya? Same story with you. No one knows who Nitish is.
Correct.
And here you're talking about sending your children to another place, a school of sorts, to stay, a residential school. It's not easy. What was going through your mind that 1 year?
I think initially when I came, I was full of energy, right? I mean, you think that you're doing something really good, you want to do something good back to the society, your idea is good, it's genuine. So it should not be really that difficult. You write 100 emails. And I learned that from my motorsport journey. Getting into Formula 1 was not easy. I think I used to write 100 emails a day probably. And I knew with that journey that, if you keep knocking on hundreds of doors, one door will open eventually. So the same sort of idea I applied to, building this or starting this non-profit. So I wrote, I don't know, lots of, like maybe 1,000, like I got emails of CEOs. My friends used to work in their companies. I used to get their, because they have access to emails, right? So I used to write, but there would not be any response. Again, because who are you? I mean, unfortunately, there's also this thing. If you have a IM study or IITN or you have studied from Harvard, they still listen to you. But here you have studied from normal colleges. I mean, I won't say normal, but people who wouldn't know the names of these colleges. So that was even more tough. I think I came back in August, September, October, November. I think from December onwards, I started to little worry. Right? And because now all the email IDs I had, I've written them twice, and nothing has happened. There has been no reply or anything. So I didn't really know what is the next step. How do we go about starting this off? Forget even sustaining this in the long run. But I guess in that whole journey, one thing again I realized from my old motorsports journey, because that was also completely new for me. And one thing I used to do that time is I used to write to a lot of people, and I wouldn't ask them to get me a job. I would just ask them to guide me, right? Because I would just say that, look, I don't know anything, but I really want to get to working in Formula 1. What did you do to reach there? What did you do where did you study? Where did you volunteer? Who did you reach out to just understand their journey? And I used to try to do similar things. So basically, I used to write to a lot of people to just understand how they build their organization and how did they reach out. So sometimes when you are not you're just asking for support and suggestions, people usually respond. That I have noticed. When you ask for money, then they might not respond, but you just ask guidance and mentorship, most of them respond. So even in this space, most of them responded. And luckily through that, one of the person who I knew, they told that, look, I think I am Bangalore is starting an incubation center. Why don't you go and meet them and tell them what you are doing, etc. So that's where I met, and they were still in their planning phase. The incubation only started in September. So basically, at that stage, what it was that you have played all your cards, you have contacted people, you have got the right people to guide you, and now you just wait for probably the universe to come back and make it happen. And what I have learned now, both from my old motorsport journey and even this non-profit, and even during COVID actually. So when you do the right things and you make all the effort, you contact people, whatever has to be done, it will fall in place. And it has fallen in place for me 3 times. And it fell in place, and then they started now responding. And then we applied, we got selected, and then funding came in September. And we also got into Nudge Foundation incubation. So we got into both. So I guess that's the learning. It's hard because it's hard to tell people that just keep writing, keep knocking at the doors, and do it. And when you do it enough a number of times, things will fall in place. And sometimes you just have to believe in the process, and it falls.
So I can relate to so many of these things that you talked about because I'm going through those currently, right? Like one of the things, my mom, for example, believes that a woman needs to be working all the time. You need to be financially independent. So when I told her I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to start something called Attitude Makeover, which is podcasting, she said, where will you make the money? And I said, I don't know. I'll have to figure this out. So even now, every time she'll call, she'll say, did some money come? And I'm like, no. So you need someone to talk to who can sort of keep you pepped up in this process, right?
Correct.
Because it's a lone journey.
It is tough, yeah.
Right? So what did you have as support system? Was that your parents? Was that your friends? Or was that just you?
So a mix of all three. Family, of course, they were supporting whatever I'm trying to do, but obviously they had also the same questions, right? First of all, how will the non-profit make the money to train? Then how will you make the money to sustain your life? And I did not know the answer. The only answer I knew was, look, if you in anything you do, if you are successful, the money will come. Maybe a little late. But when it comes, it will come where you are satisfied and you are happy with the life you want to live. So I was not worried at that stage, at least, that how will the money come. I was worried about if we have to make it successful. Because once you are successful, everybody will want to be part of what your journey is. Everybody will want to be part of supporting you and all of that, which is happening now, right, in many sense. But obviously those days answers were not there. And so family was of course worried in that sense, and another part was the friends part, and when you have a close circle, there are friends who push you also that look, you don't worry, pursue what you're doing. And luckily with the group I had, where they all came from different parts of India, and they all had their own perspectives, and some of them were, so I could go to talk to them without being worried about, they would not ask questions like what will happen in 2 years, what will happen in 3 years. So if I needed some help, they would help. So initially when we used to pitch, for funding and all, we did not have a team, of course, right? It was only me. But I used to put my friends' photos and everything, that these are the team which we have and all of that. So I used to use that, and I don't know if those people believed in that lie, or they knew that he is lying, but everybody does that, right? Because you don't have anybody, but you still have to show a team. So in that sense, a lot of people around me helped in many ways, whether in supporting. When we did our first event, a lot of my friends came to volunteer and help. And when I just wanted to talk about, say, some ideas or anything, we used to meet and discuss those things. But there are different people at different parts of the journey whom I could just talk to, whether discuss or maybe just call them at 12 o'clock at night and just talk, and they would be okay. So I think having a group is important. Family is always there, but because sometimes you can't discuss a lot of things at home because they're anyway worried. And if you go to them with more problems, they will be they'll panic even more, right? So the other circle, the friends, mentors, it helped in that journey to just keep me going. And many ways, another important thing, when you visit these villages and community, that keeps you inspired a bit. That okay, this is worth giving a try. Yeah, that helps.
One part of it that I struggled with initially, Nitish, was two things, right? One was relationship with money. Like when you were growing up, when you did your engineering, went to UK, there is a certain aspiration you went with. And here you are like sort of flattening that aspiration in a lot of ways. There is no money coming in. There's no income coming in. You're setting up an NGO. There are expenses you have to still manage with 1 lakh that you started off with. How was that? I mean, that must have been a lot of pressure that you were dealing with.
Yes, I'll be honest, right? I'm not a type of a guy who believes that whatever work you do, whether social sector or non out of the social sector, that I like to also have a good, reasonable, good life, like going out on holidays or going out on a weekend to have fun and everything. And unfortunately, in India, the social sector is somehow, I think not just India, I think world over in many ways. It's somehow the space has been shown in a way that if you're working there, you are quitting all your life and relations and luxuries, and you are just dedicating yourself to one cause or something. And I believe it need not be that. You can still enjoy your life and do good work, and that should be even more acknowledged by the society. Then, I don't have anything against any other field or anything. Then anybody who's working in corporate sector also, right? Sometimes I feel it is misbalanced. If somebody is earning 1 CR and they are so much sort of admired by the society, and if somebody is earning say 30 lakhs but actually helping 100 kids, the comparison, they don't get maybe the same admiration or accolades or in that sense. So in that way, it was decision for me was not tough, because even when I chose my motorsport journey, I knew that the first 3 years I won't be earning a lot, because you are building your base, and you are to build the base you have to make financial sacrifices, social sacrifices. That is a part of anything you do, which is a little different than the mainstream.
Yeah.
I had learned that when I was only 21, because even when I was working in these garages, like my friends were working in corporate, everybody in my family was working in corporate, and they were never, they were always supportive in many ways. So I knew that you build a strong base, and then when I went to You Can Got This Job, then I had the money, I had excess money and everything, right? Everything, whatever I wanted, I could buy. I could go on holidays, I could buy the new iPhone, I didn't buy, but whatever, the newest phone, etc., right? Yeah. But then I decided to make a choice on moving to something different, and here I realized that the journey is same again. The first 3-4 years will be tough, and it's not going to be easy financially, and again you have to make sacrifices in all ways, again social sacrifices, and luxury sacrifices, etc. But then again, I was always driven by that if the goal is clear, and if you have a plan to how to get to that success, once you reach there, then things will again come. Yeah. It will all fall in place. You just have to be strong enough to go through that difficult phase. And I think we are getting there. I don't think we have completely gotten there, but this year has been our biggest budget, like financially, for our non-profit. So things are falling in place.
That's a lovely journey, and it keeps me motivated. I think we need to, it's also about associating yourself with people who've had these kind of journeys, so there is
a silver line beyond these clouds,
yes,
and all of that.
Yes. So I want to now understand, so far it's about setting up the NGO, right? Now that you set up the NGO, it's not like overnight you decided athletics is what I'm going to go after, because you don't come from the athletics background itself. And athletics is a difficult thing, because it's also about the mind. A lot about the mind. I mean, every sport is, but it's an individual sport. So it's a lot about your mind
true.
than the teamwork and things like that. How did you pivot on athletics as against a whole lot of other sports that are there?
Correct. So initially, as you mentioned, we did a lot, whatever sports was there, like football, volleyball. We also did blind football. We used to work with blind children and teach them blind football. And then athletics was also part of it. And we were working in different states also, Orissa, Madhya Pradesh. In Karnataka itself, we were working in 2-3 different districts. So it was just a learning journey in that time. That time I didn't realize it was a learning journey, but that's when I thought this is what we want to do. We want to just give as many children as many opportunities as possible. So by second year, when we got the funding, I think that's also a learning journey. That suddenly when you get funding, you want to do everything. we were so happy and let's help as many people as possible. So we were working with 2,500 children that time.
2,500.
Yeah, 2,500 children, all across all these sports. And that's where we met a lot. Again, I told mentors and everything, right? So we started to realize that what do we want to do was again a question. Do we want to work with 1 million children and teach everybody to play 1 hour of football every day? Which is fine, which is a great thing because everybody deserves to play and have fun, right?
Yeah.
Having fun is an important part of life. Or we want to do really niche specific work where somebody succeeds and changes the whole ecosystem. Like how in badminton, after Saina Nehwal won the bronze medal, then Sindhu won the silver medal. Now, even if you go to villages of India, everybody plays badminton. So sometimes success can be driven by scale or excellence. Like you have to choose which model to go towards. And then when another part we realized was in team sports, sometimes after your athletes say get selected to a certain, say a national team or a state team, they are part of a state team and a national setup. And we might not be able to support them a lot individually as an athlete. And in an athlete's journey in sprinting or any individual track events, you know that if you have the fastest time, you have the fastest time, and we can still continue to support and nurture them. They can train anywhere they want to train. Their journey might not be dependent on many people.
Yeah.
And at the stage where we were at as a non-profit NGO at that time, we did not have access to so many resources that we can support them in many angles in a team sport and all of that, right? We had limited resources and we needed to make best use of those resources, because the first grant was 18 lakhs, I told, right? 18 lakhs you can spend in 2 months. Now I realize or you can use it efficiently to do something and have an outcome which inspires people to give more and grow as an organization. And that is when one of our mentors, he told, why don't you go and see what is happening around the world. You have read about it, you have researched about it, but why don't you actually see why are certain countries successful? So we visited a town called Eton in Kenya. At that time I got invited to the Prime Minister delegation to Eastern Africa. And I think that was the first time Indian Prime Minister visited. And because we worked with the certain community, Siddhis who come from East Africa, we were invited and I went there and I made use of it and I went to Kenya and visited this town, Eton. And so Eton, when you enter the town, there is a board like welcome to the town of world champions. Like how in India where you enter any town, there is no silk city, toy city and all of that. And basically they have roads, and the side of the roads there are no footpaths, there are running tracks. And they have produced like 10 world champions in the last couple of decades. And every middle distance runner in the world has at some point of his or her time gone to Eton and trained there. And it's a small town, as small as Mundgod basically. And in the 90s, they had produced one Olympian. Kenya had produced one Olympian. She came from Eton. And she decided to do something, and she went back and she trained a few kids, athletes, and then they trained a few more, and then they trained a few more. And now middle distance running is like the knowledge of middle distance running, how to train, when to train, how to periodize your training. It's literally in the community. Like 25% of the town's population runs. Like you can just go and join the running group every morning. It's become like a tourism thing now. I could just go and run and nobody stops you from training with them or anything. So that's where I realized in individual sports, if you build a community driven model, like Eton was sort of an inspiration in that sense. If the knowledge gets imbibed into the community itself, it can sustain in the long run. Now, basically, in place like Eton, you don't have to go and pay there, right? You can just go and train. And of course, they have said a lot of academies have come up now there, and everybody goes and trains and all of that. It's like become community driven. They're the tribal. They're called Kalenjin tribe, if I'm not wrong. So, and that's the model, and that's the inspiration. That's why we decided to focus on individual events, build the ecosystem locally in the community, driven by the community itself. And that's how it started.
So that gave you clarity on where to pivot.
Correct. And also confidence that this can be successful. Because if it has been successful in certain part of the world, it can be successful even here.
Yeah.
and that gave the confidence and the motivation. Okay, let's focus this way. That's how.
So you started then coming back to the village, and
Yes.
what you conduct sports days, and how do you go about selecting kids then?
So initially, the region Mundgod where we were, there's a community, Siddhi community who have African origins. They came to India as slaves with Portuguese. The Siddhis based in Karnataka came with the Portuguese. There's one more settlement in Gujarat who came with the Arabs, and they sort of all stayed back there. And once we start, and I knew that okay, this is a community which has a potential, because there's one YouTube video and one of my friend has sent to me. He told, why don't you go and talk to them? And I researched. So in the 1980s, the government of India had done a sports program for them called Special Area Games. And in 2 years of that program, some of them went on to represent India at the Commonwealth Games, Asian Games. Some of them, one of them was a goalkeeper in the Indian football team. They were into boxing, athletics, track events, etc. So we realized that okay, success has been achieved in this region, but for many reasons that program stopped and did not sustain beyond 2-3. They tried to restart the program 2-3 times, but it always it was like stop break thing. Yeah, it starts and stops. So I realized, okay, there is a potential here because it has been done before and they were reasonably successful. If we do it long enough and for a longer period, it can actually become a good model. So I went driving to this town searching.
You're still single man army in your NGO.
Correct.
With friends as
With
photographs.
friends and photographs. So I went driving there to search for that school where that YouTube video had. Luckily in that video there was a school which came and their photo was there. So I found the school, I met them. I told we want to do this program. Of course they thought we are from the government again and we are restarting a program. I told no, it's nothing to do with the government. We are a private entity. We just want to do sports program and let's see how it goes. And they're quite enthusiastic. Many times I think now I've learned when you go to these communities and you tell them you want to do something, they are quite open. At least the schools, right? So they went and recruited or randomly, like very random. Like they would just see height and things like that. They just ask them to throw something to see if they have the power and all of that. Very traditional way of...
This is a short put.
Yeah, basically they would make them to do 2-3 events, and if they feel that the girl or the boy physically fit and they have the height and everything, they would just bring them. Very old traditional way of, and sometimes actually it works. It's not that it doesn't work. So they selected around 30 children and they called me in 3 weeks time and they told, you came, so we went and selected 30 children. When do we start? This was in May and we did not have money or anything, right? I did not know that they would be so enthusiastic. And then I thought, okay, let's just start, see what happens. Okay, anyway, I have decided by October, if the money is in there, we'll stop. So June, July school reopens, right? So I thought, okay, whatever that money I had, we bought some equipments, like some fancy equipments and everything. And then we gave it to the school and we did a like 1-day training camp. And we told the physical education teacher to just start training. And we told we'll pay you a monthly stipend of 8,000 rupees. And I calculated by October it will be over. And if I don't get the money, then we just say, we are sorry, at least you have the equipment, you can continue training or something. That's how we just started off. We did not know where it will end, but...
So the PT teacher started with the regular training,
Correct,
like what we do in schools. Like
Correct.
I was into athletics and long jump and hockey. So for us it was, so you say mid-range is like 400 meters.
And we do, that time we were like, we just gave them equipment, football, everything. Just train.
Oh, it was just train.
Yeah, they basically had good equipments, right? So kids were very enthusiastic to, like we had parachutes and all to wear that and run and all of that.
Interesting.
So they would just, online I found some whatever training drills and everything. So I send them the YouTube links. I told just do it for 1 hour a day and they would just do it. And later I realized that they were not doing it. They would just send me photos with the kids lined up with the equipments and they would just go home. Because there was nobody to monitor there, right? They are getting 8,000 rupees and the only way of monitoring was send me photos. And they would just send me photos and I used to, something is happening, I used to assume. And that's what happened for almost 6 months. And then the money came and everything. And then I think that's the mistake we did. The first year, the same thing happened. So we went to 10 more schools, 12 more schools, and then we told them to just train. And then the only monitoring was send me photos. And also we taught them how to update data on an Excel sheet and the training data and everything. And they're all very clever. Once they realize how to do it, they just update the data and they just send the photos, and we just assume the training is happening. And that happened for almost a year in that way. And that time I was not very well versed with athletics, because I was not a sprinter, right? I was not athlete or anything. Post that one year I was looking at the data, like little on micro level, what are they all filling. The timings and all which they were filling, they were like world record timings. And I thought, this is like ridiculous. This can't be true.
Yeah.
So then we had to go back. We brought in all the coaches who were the PE teachers. Of course, there are one or two who are doing it properly, but majority of them were not doing it properly. And then we had to sit and have a talk. And I realized this model is not going to work. Because you can't just give them equipment, ask them, they'll just send photos, I'll just make them run randomly. We won't get success or anything out of it. So then we moved to a different model where we told, look, we will conduct tournaments, you bring your team, the number one team will get a cash prize, number two, number three, like that. And they all got obviously angry. Because we had told we'll give monthly salary, and now we are saying we won't give monthly salary. And that time I think a lesson, especially in social sector, every time we start something in social sector with the right, that we want to help a kid, no matter what, that is a good thing to do, so we'll continue to do that. So many times what happens, taking a hard decision in social sector becomes difficult, because that if you decide to change your model, some kids will be left out now. And you start thinking, look, I always wanted to do good. So how do I take this decision? How do I say to some kids, no, you are left out now? Or some coaches, because most of these PE teachers also are not from good backgrounds. But then I realized that you have to always keep the goal in mind. And you have to take decisions for the greater good in many ways. As long as you're taking those in a conscious way and morally right way, and for right reasons, right? If somebody was expected to do something and they didn't do it and they cheated or something like that, you have to take a right call.
Yeah.
And that was one tough phase, telling them that we are doing differently now, so everybody would be angry and everything. But with 1 or 2 months, I think everybody realized. Everybody knows if they have done a mistake, they have done a mistake. At that moment, they will not accept what was the mistake, but in the long run, they will realize it. And they all realized we don't have any animosity in the community right now. So we changed the model, and then we changed again. I think we changed it for 3-4 times until we reached this stage currently.
But that's because you were also watching the data.
Correct. We also started the better monitoring systems and looking at the information, what is coming, what is really happening, and is it really getting us closer to what we want to achieve. And if it isn't, then do something different. And then finally, again, I'm sure in the next 1 year, we will again not change the model, but improve it, right? Make it better. Every year has been better that way. Yeah. And I think with time, you realize that that's a journey which you have to take, decisions you have to take, and now when we do something new, we tell them clearly upfront, this is something we are starting, it will change. Based on your input, your feedback, we will change what we are doing. So now we don't go upfront and make the old mistakes, that we promise them something. So we are very clear from day one that if we try this, things will change, things will evolve, and we all should accept it. And we enter that thing with that risk assumed.
Got it. And how has it been? Like, my experience has been when you work with especially the unmanaged sector, right? It's not predictable, it's not consistent. There are so many things happening in their world also. And you might be very oblivious, and sometimes you don't even understand, forget empathize. You don't even understand what is happening. Like, for example, I have a live-in, and she talks about payments, rental payments, and for that she needs to go home. And I'm like, do Paytm.
Yeah.
She'll be like, I don't have that. And
Yeah.
I have to go to the bank. 10 o'clock the bank opens. And I can't empathize with that because
Yeah.
for me it is like, I'm not going to the bank for all these things.
Yeah.
Why is she? But it's very different for them. How was your early years bringing
So-
them to the residential school?
It was very, the example you gave is, from what I have learned, it's very, I feel that's fine. Because, I mean, I'll give you some examples. There was an athlete, we still have the athlete. On the full moon day, she would not train. Because in her village, somebody had, they had all told her that you get possessed on the full moon day. And she would not train, and there were times where she would just run away, and she would run faster than our oldest athlete, and you could not stop her. Right? She used to get so strong, and she would think because she's getting possessed or something. And there are things where parents would come and check the rooms to see if some other athlete has not kept things like lemon and all of that to get the athlete to perform less, because they feel it, those attract whatever, right, demons and things like that. And initially I would just not understand. I say, how do you make them explain that there is nothing like that? But when you, obviously at that time you look at it at a very, like an angle where you just think that they are just uneducated and they don't know the world, and you think of yourself as somebody who's educated and you try to tell them from that way. But then when you spend enough time in the community, you will see that that's part of their culture of how they have grown up. Like some of the festivals they celebrate, they have like 3 people in the village who sit in the puja, and then apparently the people who have died in that year, they come into their body and tell why they passed away, and they tell who made them, or who, because of whom they passed away, and things like that. And I saw that ritual actually.
Wow.
That ritual was literally happening. It happens every year.
Wow.
And
Okay.
for them, it's a big thing. Like the 8 days they celebrate during the Dasera time and everything.
So that means your students have to go back home.
No, we don't. They go. They have holidays on 1 or 2 festivals, important festivals. So that we manage, and now we'll come to that part also. But on this thing, we realized that, look, that is how they have grown. If I had grown up in the same community, in the same way, I would have also believed on the same things. Now, just because I've grown up in Bangalore or some other city, I don't believe it because I've been exposed to different things. Now, they haven't been exposed to those things. And when COVID happened, we had to take care of their education, and we realized that even kids who are 17, 16 years old, they can't do simple maths. They can't, even though they have passed every standard, they can't do any like simple like 3 plus 7. They wouldn't know how to calculate that. There were, I don't know, some or everybody, they believed Earth is still flat. Like they used to ask, like, if you walk, will I fall off at certain point? And we might laugh at these things, but the point is they were never, nobody told them all of this. Nobody explained them these things. And that's when we realized that it's more, our job is more than just teaching them how to run fast, because they will, when they get success, they will travel the world, and we also need to educate them in a lot of things which they did not have an opportunity to do. So I guess that's how we learn that it's okay, somebody might not know something, and like if I don't know physics, I might not know what is an atom or a nucleus, and a physicist might laugh at me that how can you just not know what is an atom. So for them it's like that, right? What they don't know, they don't know.
Yes.
So,
And I think that's how you went into a holistic model of
Correct,
psychologist,
Yeah.
trainer, food and nutrition, education, and
Yes.
the holistic approach to the
Correct.
residential journey.
Correct. So initially when we just started running and shoes, providing them shoes. Then we realized that the nutrition is nothing. If they don't eat well, how much ever you train, you can't really become faster or stronger. So then the nutrition started. And then they were still staying in a school hostel. So we didn't have access to them full time. So we only had access to them on training ground. And then we, in the school kitchen, we used to ask them to make different foods. We used to pay for them, and then they used to make the athlete food or protein and everything, right? But then once or twice we traveled with the athletes, and one of the athlete when they traveled for races outside of the Mundgo, like Bangalore, Mysore, etc. Of course you start realizing that there is so much more. Like they don't have knowledge about hygiene or menstrual hygiene, or even for guys general hygiene, and they would not know, because again nobody told them that you have to wash your clothes every 2 days or something like that, right? So simple things we started to realize that to make them professional athletes, we need to actually teach them a lot of things, because it's a whole your athlete is a personality. And so that's when we decided, okay, now it's time where we have to have our own residential setup where we get time to talk to them, to make them understand, to teach them all these other areas. Because we learned it at our home, but unfortunately both their parents have to work because they have to survive for living. Nobody has time to teach or learn from it, and they don't have access to technology to learn also. So that's how we sort of moved from doing one or two things to now almost everything we take care of, from whatever, like their basic toothbrush to their shoes and training and everything. Yeah.
Now, when you have kids come in, Nitish, I'm not, when I come in, for example, there as a residential student, I'm still not driven to be an Olympic champion and things like that. I've just got selected,
Yeah.
right? So from there to mold someone with this aspiration, this is an aspiration the NGO has. It's still not an
For
aspiration
the
that this
children.
child has.
Yeah.
Maybe some parent has that, or probably you just painted a visual thing of it, but they also cannot visualize
Yeah,
it
yeah,
fully. How do you go about really, and that means then you're actually pushing for something with, someone who has very low confidence, who is not
Yeah.
exposed to the world.
True.
Then you're putting an aspiration which is that big.
Yeah.
How do you go about like really bringing them to that point? I would think that is really the
Yes,
tough
I
part.
mean, almost all the kids, maybe barring one kid, Ravi Kiran, who actually he knew about Usain Bolt, and because he used to watch on YouTube, he didn't know how to get there, but he had something that he wants to run and be fast and all of that. Everybody, 99% of the kids, mostly they came because they're going to get good food. Like they're going to get eggs, chicken, and because they only eat nice food maybe in a festival or something, right? So most of them feel it's good food and let's do it. If I have to run for 2 hours a day and I get great food, I'll run for 2 hours a day. Now, that's the simple day-to-day motivation to train. And for most of the parents, it was that, look, we might not able to get our child to finish the graduation or complete their studies in a good school and give them facilities and all of that. If they are coming and doing that as an NGO, and they think my child has some potential in sports, okay. Of course, it's not so easy. It takes some convincing, because they need to trust us. They need to believe that we will take care of the child properly and all of that. But that's their motivation in general for parents, that okay, my child will get access to great, because we promise them, no matter once they're inducted, whatever happens, we'll at least support them finish their graduation. Maybe after 10th standard we realize that they are not good in, they might not have a opportunity to succeed in running, but we still say we'll get them into a good college. They'll still finish their graduation. They might not be in the hostel, they will study in the college at least. So that's okay, that's good enough motivation. Like for Nayana, she's the first girl from the village to now start pursuing graduation. So that's a parent motivation. Now how do you get them from there to start pushing their kids, or kids themselves pushing themselves to think about Olympics and all? That journey is it's been evolving over the years. Like we try to talk to them about successful athletes, their journeys. We show them now, like the Tokyo Olympics happened, they all watched it live, so they now see that okay, what they can be or where they can be, and that dream starts setting in their head slowly. And more importantly, I think it's creating a more inspiring stories at every level, because currently they are very young. There's say one kid who's 12-year-old. For him or her, the inspiration would be to win a state medal or a district medal. Now luckily over 4 years time, we have people at each level. We have a district champions. Almost every kid every kid is a district champion. So we just go there and we win now. And now at state level, we have like 2, 3 people. Now the younger kids, they see up to him or her that, okay, I also want to be a state champion. Now, people who are state champion, they look at, say, Nayana, who is a national champion, and she's gone to UK now to train under one of the best coaches in the world, and she's now going and watching the Commonwealth Games. So now we show them, right? So there's inspiration at every level. And now for Nayana, the inspiration when today I think maybe in a few hours she'll be there at the Commonwealth Games ground, Birmingham, to watch today's 100-meter finals. So when she watches that, now she has an inspiration too, that she wants to be there in 3 years' time, running in that ground and everybody cheering for her. So that took us 4 years. Now we have at every level there is somebody to motivate somebody below them. And I think that's the whole journey. And now with few years, when more athletes go and actually participate at international level, everybody now starts getting motivated.
It's sort of the true spirit of the community then,
yes,
right?
Yes.
They start seeing one, and then
everybody starts
the community
getting
starts building up.
Like when Naina won the national medal, like literally every administrator or politician, everybody visited her and invited her to functions to garland her and everything. That had never happened. So that for parents, that becomes the inspiration, right? Because of parents, her daughter, her son being at the stage and getting acknowledged by the whole community is a big deal. Yeah. Because now when they walk down the village, everybody sees them with respect and pride and all of that. Yeah. So I think success drives success, right? But that's the challenge. How do you survive for 4 years to get to that? Once you get there, then things becomes easier, but you have of course new challenges. Yeah. But that's the thing. You somehow need to get there. Yeah. That's all. Yeah.
As a child, like for me, when I left India to work in the US, I think you can relate with this. You probably first time landed in UK. Mm-hmm. It's a different experience.
Of course, yeah.
Right, and especially when I hadn't traveled much at all. And so for me, first time when I landed there, it was like, oh God. What is happening here? Everything, right? Like how they greet driving, to everything is different. How do you prepare a Naina, for example, right now in UK, and she'll start soon competing there with others? How do you prepare? And that holds a certain space in your mind when it comes to a competition like sports.
Of course.
Right? Everything from shoes to your clothes, everything, and your attitude, and the team that is there around you, how many coaches, what kind of food you have, everything has a huge mental impact on a student. How do you prepare them for that?
Well, I think the journey starts from the village only, right? Because when, say if you take a specific example of Naina itself, when she came to our center first, she did not have shoes. She did not have, she was like literally very thin, 1 or 2 shirts and pants, that's all. And she would train in that only. And then we got her some shoes and the training attire, and the food started to come in. So that itself started to bring in small changes, that she realized, okay, there is a different type of lifestyle also I can live. And before that, she only used to think it might be ever possible in her life, right? And then when she traveled to Mysore, Bangalore for her first state meet or national meet, of course she would see athletes from Bangalore who are coming with all these Nike shoes, and the training attire is all like top end and everything. So half the battle would be lost at the starting line itself, because she would think they are wearing so much cooler gear and the shoes, how will I ever defeat them? Yes. And she lost her first semi-finals at the nationals. She came last or something. And of course she was sad and everything. And then that's when we also realized, right, the holistic part, that's where the psychologist angle came in, that we need to develop them and tell them that they are no less than anybody there. And that shoes is not going to define how will they win that race or not. Their ability and their mental ability is only going to define whether they'll win a race or not. And then, but of course, then at that stage, we also realized telling them mentally might be one thing, but also us doing things in a professional manner will also be an important thing. Because if we treat them like one room, 8 people just sleep, they will also have that I'll adjust with anything mindset. But if you also treat them as professional athletes, and we give them bunker beds, we have proper shoes, we have spikes. Training shoes is different than the spikes. We have proper nutrition, the supplements, everything. They start feeling a little more professional. And of course that's important.
Yeah.
You have to do that to take somebody to a. Yeah, it's not as you are doing it for sake of it.
You walk that process till you actually,
So that happens, and then slowly she, gets more confidence. She starts training with the same attire in the training ground in Mundgod. Now everybody starts seeing her and respecting. Every other girl also starts saying that, okay, I don't have to be shy to wear a certain outfit and everything, right? So it starts trickling down to everything. And then she went to the nationals for last year when she qualified to the national championship. She went on a flight, she landed there, and she was much more confident. Like if you see the video, she was very confident, like any other girl in that. You would not make out that, okay, this girl comes from a very difficult background or anything as such. Then we also started communications classes for them, language classes. And not just communicating in the local language Kannada, but also teaching them things like English. And we don't believe that somebody needs to learn English to succeed in life. But we realize that at some point they're going to train other coaches who are going to speak them in that language. It's better for them to understand at least the basics. Because again, that mentally it gives them the confidence.
Correct.
Because when I also went to UK, the accent, it's very difficult to understand, and sometimes you start doubting yourself, right? Even though we come from so much education, so much exposure. So that started. So now when she landed in UK, before she left, I met her and I told her things like, you don't try to be somebody else, right? You do what you want to do. Just because you're in UK, you don't have to use knife and fork. You use your hand and eat. Nobody cares and nobody should care and you should not care. And I was trying to tell her all of this and she was like, sir, you don't have to. I'm okay, I know. I won't try to be anybody else. So they were ready. We were just worried. And she's there and she's just she's training with the local athletes. She's happy. There is no inhibition in her and everything. So I guess if you do the process right, it'll just automatically, it'll fall in place. But obviously, I think now when she comes back, she'll be even more mentally confident when she competes against other athletes, because she will think mentally that I have trained under the best coach, few of the best coaches in the world. I should not be worried about where they trained or anything.
I think one thing you bring out in this conversation, Nitish, is when you set a culture, when you start setting a culture, it's not just what you aspire for, it's also who you're onboarding and what is their culture. And, it's a marriage of these two. That's when a win-win really happens.
Correct.
And you really have to strive for that as a leader. Did I get that right?
Yes, I think it is very right, because as I mentioned, right, initially when we used to understand about their kids or their background, we used to just look at it from our perspective and we used to try to teach them things from our perspective. And I think with time, when we brought in the team, the coaches from the same community means the same region, and coaches who, even though they were from a different town or different cities, who were very empathizing in nature. That's what we see when we bring somebody in who sees things from their perspective, from the kids' perspective. And only when you understand where they come from, when you go and meet, have lunch at their house, or have dinner at their house, go and stay there for a couple of days, you start talking to them from their language or from their learnings, and that makes it easier. Because initially, I think even that was one of the big reasons why the special area games or the different projects with the Siddhi community did not work. Because you need to understand, they have lived in the forest for like 400 years, and until independence they were like slaves treated, and only in 2003 they got actually the SC/ST status. Before 2003 they were not even recognized, so that means they couldn't even go to government schools, get their ration or anything like that. So they are always in a way they feel a little afraid into the open community, right? That's why they stayed back in the forest. And when you suddenly bring them to Bangalore or Delhi and start training them, they won't they're not able to adjust to the whole this lifestyle and all of that. So many of them just went back. They dropped the program, they run away back to the village where they come from. And when you don't understand why they went back, everybody thought, look, we can't teach them. They are not focused. They are not able to adjust to the discipline of an athlete, etc. And that's how the program stopped. So I think that marriage didn't happen during the old programs. And when we researched in the first 2 years, that's what we learned. And that's when we realized, look, we have to do it with the community. We can't. And that's how our center is there only. Like all our kids can go to their home within 1 hour of travel. Like they're all in a 50-kilometer radius. And growing age, you always miss home, right? So you can't bring them too far, too early. So that's how it started.
And what's your future like? Where are you headed?
Sure.
I mean, because see, so far from that October deadline that you went through, I have a December deadline, by the way. By December is what my mom has given me a deadline.
Yes.
And we're already in August, so we're really fast with it. But you've come a long way in terms of giving that equal opportunity to someone who otherwise doesn't have it, which was the bigger mission or the purpose. Now that you set that up, what's the bigger picture?
So now really the bigger picture is in the next 4-5 years for us to deliver, for these kids, athletes to deliver at the international stage. How can we now that the local community level ecosystem has been set up, how can we enhance that? For example, how can we convert that ground into a synthetic track? How can we start building better training facilities available to the local community? And these facilities need not be owned by us. It can be done with partnerships with the community, with the local administration, etc. How can we move towards bringing in the administration now to our project? Because that's sustainability, right? Once you can convince the local government, local administration that this is something important, this is something which can make good to the community, then it's very helpful. So that angle, how do we build partnerships with the community level administration? And then how do we give these athletes exposure and opportunities to train from a few of the best coaches in this world? Because to achieve something truly great, you need to have that environment of coaches, of other athletes who are at a similar level. Now we will reach there probably in 5 years' time. We don't need to go to different parts of the world and train, because then our team would have learned the process, the journey. Now we can deliver national level athletes. Our team is capable of that. Now how do we go from national level to international level, right? So we need to learn as a team the next 3, 4, 5 years. And through that learning, we still need to give opportunities to upcoming senior athletes to go and train and represent India at the Commonwealth Games, Asian Games, Youth Games. And the 2028 Olympics is a big target which we have set that we need to be there. Like the October deadline for the NGO when in the first it's moved to 2020 at that, because we believe if we can't get to that stage by 2028, then what are we here doing? I mean, of course we're changing lives at one level, but we want to change it at a different scale, and we believe if we achieve that by 2028 we can do that. So
how can companies' CSR initiatives help Bridge Sports?
I think in many ways nutrition is a big chunk of our operational cost, right? And these are fixed costs in many ways. They need to have a certain type of supplements, protein, etc. Nutrition is a big way and also it's an easiest way to support an athlete. Every athlete needs a certain type of nutrition. So nutrition is one way. I mean, the training gear, the shoes, the whole attire, right? We need to at least buy 3-4 shoes per year. They wear out very soon. And the training attire also. That's another way. Now some of the corporates who are supporting us right now, they're supporting athletes like Naina to train in places like UK and abroad under the good coaches. We are looking at ways, what if we bring a great coach here itself for a period of 1 year, because then learning becomes quicker and more people can
benefit from
more people can benefit. That's more logistically also makes it sensible. So if somebody can come on board to support that coach for 1 year to come and be here in India, and a lot more, not just our NGO, right? Even others can come and learn from there. So So these are some many ways, and of course, if somebody is looking at a bigger scale and bigger dream, of course, how do we get that excellence center in Mundgo to become much more sophisticated, convert them into synthetic track, get more sports science involved, etc. Now that's a very big, that's really the long term. By 2028, if we reach there, then we have reached the stage of Eton, right? And we know that community can drive the whole innovation.
Yeah, yeah. Any advice for people who are in that situation like Nitish was when you were in 2013? How do you go about taking a plunge?
I think first you should really be sure about okay, you want to take the plunge. No, you should not have doubts in your head, because even if you have a little bit of doubt, you'll always think of going back. So take the time to really think, and in that time do a lot of research. Like a lot of our success was because we read a lot, met a lot of people to understand whatever you want to do, understand that space in depth. Like you should be an expert of that space. And then if after doing this both you're really sure that you want to do it, then there is no way of doing it sitting in a room. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to get on the ground. You have to meet people, you have to travel, you have to meet everybody in that value chain of whatever you're doing, and to understand. Like at some point it should reach a stage where everybody, at least most of them in that value chain should know you. Okay, that guy or that girl has come so many times and irritated me, and they will eventually just say, okay, what do you want? I'll support you.
Yeah.
So you have to be ready to irritate people.
Yeah.
And it is a hard thing, but you have to do it. There is no other way. There's no nice way to go and ask help or support, or whether it's funding wise or whether it's any way. If they say no, you have to ask again. If they say no, you have to ask again. And eventually they do.
Yeah.
So yes.
And what does attitude makeover mean to you?
I think now I understand the name after going through this whole process is of how it's not that you're changing your personality or anything, but you're changing the way you look at your own attitude towards the outside world. It's the same person, it's the same thing, but you're just looking at it in a different lens. Yeah. And when you look at it in a different way, you see different things. I
New
guess
opportunities.
That,
Yes.
I understood that.
Well, thank you so much. I think I bumped into the article. Here's how I found you.
Right.
I bumped into that Al Jazeera's article with Ravi Kiran.
Yes.
And there was a YouTube video plus a whole article.
Yes.
And I really liked. Then I bumped into your website. I went into what exactly is Bridge of Sports. And then I reached out through your Instagram account to somebody, and they said, let me talk to the founder and come back. And like you said, I reach out like this based on, because for me it is very important to bring people with a journey and a purpose. True. So I thought you're not going to respond, but I think you responded that day itself. And I think initially we were planning to have Naina as well, but good luck to her.
Yes.
I'd love to have her again.
Sure, anytime. I think once she's back, we can.
But thank you so much.
Thank you for reaching out. And I think, as I told, I think when more people reach out, then we feel that, okay, we are doing the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you, and it was a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Nitish.